All right, guys, let's get started. Let's get started. All right, just go down to chapter number 34. Okay, so stuff that we're going to cover this week is the stuff you will get tested on next weekend. You will get tested on chapter number 32 and chapter number 33 stuff. So the 32 is something that we covered last week, so the videos are already up. 33 lectures I'm already working on, so it's mostly mathematical or theoretical. So this stuff is going to be ready, up and go, ready to go tomorrow. All right, so 34 is the stuff that we will cover. I noticed that we got 4-part lecture material. These are not the ones I'm going to cover in class, so we'll still be responsible for watching these videos. Okay, I'm going to cover the more conceptual side in class or on Zoom right now. All right, so what you need is you need to open up chapter 34 lecture review material, and also you need chapter number 23 lecture part 1 PDF. All right, so that's the, just get that stuff open up. Okay, so chapter 23 of lecture part 1, you got the PDF that we will need for this. So we'll focus on the concepts today, and then you got the lecture review material, and make sure that this is also up and ready. All right, so we're gonna, let's get started with the electromagnetic waves.
Tonight, cell phones. Whatever you think you've heard before, you must pay attention. The industry insists they're perfectly safe.
There is not a link between the use of wireless phones and health effects.
But now, there are new warnings just made public about children and cell phones. Serious new questions. And this man, head of the industry's research program for 6 years, no longer keeping silent about what he knows.
We now have some direct evidence of possible harm for cellular phones.
When 2020 put some of the most popular cell phones to the test, we came up with surprising results. Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross with a report everyone will be talking about. Worry about your wireless.
All right, so the cell phones, are they safe? They've been debating this forever, in case you didn't know. The debate ended up taking the news form, thanks to 5G. So the question is, cell phones, are they safe? Depends on the radiation that they're using, right? So what kind of radiation do you think that the cell phones use? I guess jump in at this point. I know you know something. You can't be completely clueless. Say it again?
Microwave radiation?
Lucas, did you say microwave?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to back out of it, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Why did you say microwave?
Honestly,
Mistake,
I don't
right?
know. It's been a weird day.
Yeah, it's a mistake. Guys, if cell phone companies were to use microwaves, you wouldn't be using cell phones, would you?
No.
Depends on what you're trying to do with it.
Well, you're not trying to pop popcorn, obviously. So you wouldn't use cell phones if they were to use microwaves, right? Hello? Did you guys got the line?
Not on my head.
Oh, not on your head. No, you wouldn't do that because that would be stupid, guys. And we know that people don't do stupid stuff after long.
Never.
Anyways, so that never happens. All right. So
Can I second guess?
Lucas, go ahead.
I'm gonna go with probably radio waves.
Most people would go with radio waves because that's the way to go, basically, right? All right, so 10, 15 years ago, I'm in Turkey talking to this guy who's a businessman. he's extremely rich, and except this guy has an engineering degree. So he's we were talking about physics, and then all of a sudden he becomes real interested in the topic that we were discussing. So we were about to leave, and then he said, "Oh, I just want to continue this discussion. Can I have your cell phone number?" I looked at him. I said, "No." I said, he looks at me. He says, he looked kind of offended. He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I don't have a cell phone." And he looks at me again. He said, "Is that because of radiation?" So at that point, I'm looking at him. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "There's cell phone radiation." I said, "Yeah, I understand that. What are you talking about?" He said, "The cell phone radiation can cause cancer." And I looked at him. I said, "How would you know?" He hands me over his cell phone. On his cell phone, it literally says, "Warning, this may cause cancer." This is the sort of stuff that you see on cigarette packages. I said, "How would you guys know about it?" He said, "Oh, it's a known fact. They've been investigating forever, evidently." I said, no, the reason why I don't have a cell phone, I said, not because of radiation. I said, I don't want to make myself available to anyone to that extent. I said, he said, yeah, I understand what you're talking about. That's the reason why he's got secretaries. Because people waste a lot of time just talking about this and that, guys. The cats meow, dogs bark, people talk, it's white noise. A lot of it is waste of time. So because of it, I do limit my communications to only Facebook and Messenger. Anyway, so to make the long story short, cell phone companies, they use radio waves. Anyway, so move 5 years forward. I'm in a cell phone store with a girlfriend that I had at the time, and then she wanted to get a new cell phone. So I'm just staring at the wall as usual, aimlessly, and then this guy walks up to me, and then this guy is obviously working there on commission, and he decided that he was going to try to get me interested in a cell phone. I said, I'm not interested, so this guy's still trying real hard. I said, by the way, what kind of radiation do cell phones use? And then he looked really stunned just briefly. He said, they use white radiation. And I said, what's the white radiation if it's not white light? Do you guys notice how incredibly ignorant you are regarding the sort of radiation that the cell phone companies use? Most of you guys think that they use radio waves. All the frequencies within the radio wave range, guys, have been taken out for commercial as well as military usage. So if it's not radio waves, what are we looking at? You know, the cell phone companies would never use microwaves because of what we do with microwaves, right? What is it that we do with microwaves?
Let's go to science class for Bill and Ted's excellent microwave experiment. Microwave manufacturers are very strict about the types of things you should put in their ovens. No aluminum foil, no metal pots or pans, and certainly no eggs. Apparently, Bill and Ted didn't read the excellent direction.
All right, so speaking of microwaves, we use them for cooking purposes. The egg ended up exploding because what happened on the inside, as you increase the temperature, it became much more pressurized because the molecules are moving much faster. So you crack the shell and you end up getting an explosion out of it. Did you guys know that you could do the same with a piece of grape? Just heat it up and then just break the skin and you may end up getting an explosion. And then it's gonna stick to the skin you're looking at. If it does, you're looking at 1st and 2nd degree burns. Amazing practical joke on someone you don't like. How about just doing the same thing with water? How many of you guys knew that you can actually superheat water in the sense that you can get it to actually explode on your face? Just boil the water first, watch the bubbles form, let it cool down, and boil it again. Watch the bubbles form again. The 3rd time around, just keep boiling it until you see no bubbles. At that point, you can literally just take the water out, either shake it or break the surface tension using a knife or a spoon. You're going to end up getting an explosion. That water can explode all the way up to the ceiling. What do you suppose causes that? Speaking of microwaves, cell phones use microwaves. You have been using microwaves forever and ever and ever without even noticing it.
Good evening, and welcome to 2020
So the question is, are they dangerous? Let's take a look at that.
Friday. It is a possibility that refuses to go away. Could the cell phones you and your children use be a danger to your health? A new British study just out says that while there is not enough evidence to prove harm, children should restrict their use of cell phones. And we'll tell you more about this later. But this isn't the first troubling development. Last fall, we brought you a report from our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, looking into a possible link between cell phones and your brain. What he discovered could change the way you and your family use your cell phone.
From Los Angeles to London, few people spend more time on the phone than the flamboyant British billionaire Richard Branson.
Hello, it's Richard Branson.
The man who created the Virgin Records and Virgin Air business empires. The man who 4 times tried to go around the world in a hot air balloon. Richard Branson has become rich and famous by taking lots of risks. But one risk he says he won't take is with his cell phone.
Do not put your phone up to your ear because it could fry your brain.
Branson won't put a cell phone anywhere near his head, using a small headset contraption instead.
There's the phone. There's the earpiece, and just keep the phone away from the body, and put the earpiece in either ear, and you've got a little microphone here, and you can talk.
It's something he's done ever since a close friend, who was a heavy user of cell phones, died from brain cancer.
Feel like that, right.
The $200 billion a year cell phone industry maintains the scientific evidence doesn't support any such fears. But it turns out Richard Branson is not alone in his belief that cellular phones can no longer be presumed to be safe.
I might sing every day.
In fact, even the man who 6 years ago was brought in by the industry to quell such fears, Dr. George Carlo, is now prepared to publicly say that has been the case all along.
You cannot guarantee that cell phones are safe. That's absolutely true, but that has always been true.
When cell phones first came out, it was widely assumed there couldn't be a risk because the power or radiation they produce was so low. But now that assumption is very much being called into question by several new scientific studies, which, while still preliminary, are regarded by some scientists as quite troubling. The cell phone transmits a microwave signal from the antenna to a base station or tower, often miles away. The farther away from the tower, or if the phone is inside a building or a car, the more power this phone is told by the tower to send out to make or keep the connection. Depending on how close the cell phone antenna is, as much as 60% of the microwave radiation is absorbed by and actually penetrates the area around the head, some reaching 1 inch to 1.5 inches into the brain.
And if I hold it to my head like this, there is no way that I can avoid getting a sizable amount of that energy in my head and my hand.
Dr. Ross Eady at the University of California, Riverside is widely regarded as one of, if not the most respected scientist in the field, a man who has worked for industry and government for decades studying microwave radiation.
This is the first generation that has put relatively high-powered transmitters against the head, day after day after day.
Choosing his words carefully for this interview with 2020, Dr. Adie says the body of research, while still far from conclusive, raises the possibility of some very serious harm from extensive exposure to cell phones.
The picture that's emerging is that over the lifetime of the individual, you may see changes that could be considered health effects or potential health risks, including leukemia and brain tumors.
Those are scary words. Brain tumors, leukemia.
I understand, and I think responsibly, one has to bring those into the forefront.
Which may come as quite a surprise to the more than 80 million Americans, some 300 million more around the world who use cell phones.
Just had to check in for messages.
And who heard similar concerns 6 years ago, dismissed as unfounded scares.
Hi, happy birthday.
I believe that the cellular phone is safe.
Thomas Wheeler is the president of the Cell Phone Industries Trade Group in Washington, D.C.
Our industry has gone out and aggressively asked the question, can we find a problem? And the answer that has come back is that there is nothing that has come up in the research that suggests that there is a linkage between the use of a wireless phone and health effects.
Nonsense. In a word, simple. Nonsense.
Dr. Louis Slesson is the editor of Microwave News, a widely read and influential trade newsletter, which tracks the cell phone business and frequently criticizes what Slesson says is the industry's attempt to ignore or spin troublesome scientific findings.
This is about PR, not about science. There's research from Australia, there's research from England, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Germany, all pointing in a direction Mr. Wheeler doesn't want to look. Essentially, we have reports of headaches, of cancer, of changes in blood pressure, changes in sleeping patterns.
Among the most recent work, that of this Swedish doctor, Leonard Hardell, who studied phone habits of brain tumor patients. While Dr. Hardell found no increased risk of cancer overall, he did find that those who used the phone on the left side had a predominance of tumors on the left side. Those who used the phone on the right side had a predominance of tumors on the right.
This is an important indication, and as a manufacturer, I would be actually worried.
His pilot study was nowhere near big enough to be scientifically conclusive, but enough for Dr. Hardell to recommend that cell phone users take steps to minimize their exposure and be especially cautious about children using cell phones.
There is no smoking gun. We don't know that they're unsafe, but there is tons of information from all over the world showing a problem.
But there's no sign the cell phone industry sees it that way.
A whole new way to use your wireless phone.
If anything, the industry's current ad campaigns encourage consumers, even children,
Hey, Dad, I need a ride home.
to use cell phones much more than they do now.
Talk all you want. Your family. I'm a big bucket guy.
Use it how much, you say?
I mean, I buy the big bucket of minutes, which is, 1,600 minutes, and then go beyond that.
The industry's Thomas Wheeler says there's no reason to cut back cell phone use, and that the focus in studies like Dr. Hardell's should be on the positive findings.
Dr. Hardell, in his study, says that he could not find a link between the use of a wireless phone epidemiologically and brain cancer. What he did find was an interesting handedness issue.
Interesting.
And
He says, based on his findings, he would recommend use cell phones as little as possible. My question to you is, would you agree with that advice?
I think that there is a preponderance of evidence that there is not a linkage between the use of wireless phones and health effects.
This is hardly the first time health concerns have been raised about cellular phones.
Can you recognize this as being the phone you used?
Yes, I do.
Is this the phone?
Yes.
6 weeks after this videotaped deposition in 1993, Susie Raynard of Tampa, Florida, died of brain cancer. Her husband, David, claiming his wife's cancer was caused by her cell phone.
The tumor was exactly in the pattern of the antenna.
David Raynard went on to almost single-handedly create a national scare when he filed a lawsuit and went public with his allegations.
Well, we're suing the carrier, we're suing the manufacturer.
There was great alarm on Wall Street, and even though Raynard's lawsuit was later thrown out by a judge for a lack of reliable scientific evidence, it left the cell phone industry with a huge public relations problem.
So what our industry is announcing here today
and led to the announcement of a $25 million industry research program to be run by Dr. George Carlo, a public health consultant who was labeled then by some as a kind of scientific shill for the cell phone industry.
Do you think they thought they had bought you?
I hope that they didn't, but I think that they probably did.
And now, after 6 years of running the industry's research program, Dr. Carlo has come to a surprising conclusion, forcing him, he says, to break ranks with the industry, to add his voice to those increasingly concerned about the safety of cell phones.
We've moved into an area where we now have some direct evidence of possible harm from cellular phones.
In a revealing interview with 2020, Dr. Carlo said he felt he had no choice but to blow the whistle on what he says has been going on behind the scenes.
The industry had come out right after that program and said there are thousands of studies that prove that wireless phones are safe. And the fact was that there were no studies that were directly relevant.
Meaning no studies directly relevant to cell phone exposure. But there are now, including studies Carlo oversaw and that the industry approved and paid for.
And this simulates exactly the type of...
Clearly suggesting two potential problems, according to Carlo. Genetic damage, based on laboratory tests involving human blood. And an increased risk of a rare type of brain tumor, based on a study of brain tumor patients, although no overall increase in cancer was found.